Thank you, Mr. Chair and members. My name is Alicia Beckmann, and I work for the Department of Corrections as a GED teacher beginning the fall of 2013 at Lino Lakes and transferred to Shakopee, where I remained for just shy of 10 years. I have a bachelor's degree in criminal justice, a master's degree in education, and I'm a licensed teacher in the state of Minnesota. In June of 2023, unbeknownst to myself, frontline staff, and roughly 600 female offenders, Christina Craig Lusk, a biological male, was transferred to Shakopee Correctional Facility after he successfully won a lawsuit against the Department of Corrections. This decision, supported by the commissioner, opened the floodgates for the nightmare that was to follow. Multiple incarcerated men were able to manipulate the system and transfer to Shakopee thanks to an ambiguous policy riddled with loopholes that allowed the transfer of these biological males. The men who ultimately transferred to Shakopee included at least 2 sex offenders and 1 murderer with a violent history during his incarceration over the past 30 years. At no point were the staff of Shakopee given a voice. We were handed the policy and given a directive to follow it. The only training received had to do with definitions and vocabulary as it related to gender and sex. Upon voicing my concerns via chain of command regarding this new policy, I was simply told I needed to follow it. It was clear that there was no fighting this from inside. Each day, the women of Shakopee must face their fears and subject themselves to re-traumatization and re-victimization by having biological males housed within close proximity to them. Each day they wonder, will my co-defendant or ex try to transfer here? Will the man who sexually exploited me through prostitution try to transfer here next? A large percentage of incarcerated women have been victims of sexual, emotional, and physical abuse at some point in their lives. So putting violent sex offenders within close quarters to them seems punitive and counterproductive. At no point were the roughly 600 women of Shakopee given a voice in this matter. Instead, the voice of one trumped theirs. The purpose of incarceration is twofold: for punishment and to keep society safe. Once incarcerated, the Department of Corrections has an obligation to provide a safe incarceration. Putting the request of one offender's needs or desires above all others seems to negate the safety component. Roughly 90% of incarcerated individuals will be released back into society after completing their prison term. Subjecting these women to being housed with biological males is not conducive to their healing, recovery, and overall preparation to be successful upon release. For years, gender responsiveness was the big push at Shakopee. We were repeatedly taught and trained that women are different than men, and therefore we need to respond to them according to their gender, not their believed gender. Evidence-based practices that are in place at Shakopee were written for women, not men. The Department of Corrections has taken the stance that they have an obligation to provide medical treatment to include gender dysphoria. However, transferring men to a women's prison has nothing to do with medical treatment. The DOC also claims that decisions around facility placement undergo a robust and thorough review by a multidisciplinary review committee. However, the men we have seen come through the doors of Shakopee are there for one reason: to manipulate the system. It should come as no surprise that one man has already been transferred back to a men's facility and is now incarcerated at Stillwater. So much for a robust and thorough review. An administrator within the DOC made claim back in September after my Alpha News interview that there have been no reported instances of violence or threats. This is simply not true. I've spoken to several correctional officers that have filed reports on behalf of women who have been harassed, flashed, intimidated, and overall live in fear of their safety. One incarcerated woman was brave enough to step forward to share her story with Alpha News, and it spoke volumes. I think it's also worth noting that many women have not come forward due to fear of retaliation or losing privileges like early release. Staff have also remained silent due to fear of retaliation. The only reason I am able to speak today is I made the extremely hard decision to walk away from a career I loved and excelled at. I've been thanked and supported by dozens of staff for being their voice, as they can't walk away from their career. The day my students came to me in tears, not knowing what to do about their fear and concern about men being incarcerated at Shakopee, was the day I realized I could no longer help keep them safe. I knew my job would be in jeopardy had I spoken up while still employed. The environment at Shakopee shifted drastically in June of 2023 for staff and offenders and continues to be an issue today. Staff are being forced to ignore science, their morals, and to put their safety in jeopardy. Female officers are forced to do strip searches on biological males. Can you imagine what these officers have to face each day? In what world is this appropriate? This needs to stop before it gets any worse. Look at California's prison system. Women are being raped, impregnated, and assaulted by biological males. These men are taking advantage of an egregious policy, and the change needs to start today. Please stop this madness and help return Shakopee Correctional Facility to what it was intended for, a space for women only. We have a duty and obligation to them, not violent, sexual predators looking for an easy incarceration, protective custody, an attempt at early release, and the opportunity to prey on vulnerable women. Thank you.